Hello, it's Scott again, and today we're going to talk about, in particular, the Sony A7 III and the Fuji X-H1. But essentially, we're going to be talking about the general argument that APS-C is lighter than a full-frame system, which, after you listen today, you might change the way you look at that particular comparison. Now, I'm using the A7 III and the Fuji X-H1 mainly because they are two new modern cameras and they are, in my opinion, very comparable. Now, a lot of people will make the argument that it's unfair to compare a full frame to APS-C camera, and hopefully once I explain you won't feel that's the case at all. And in fact, considering that these cameras are almost identical price-wise, they really are comparable cameras. And as you'll see, the way I'm going to look at them today, they are particularly comparable. Now let me say right off the bat, as far as these two cameras go, I have no skin in the game because I've already determined for myself personally that before I buy another camera, that camera is going to have 4K 60 frames per second, and neither one of these cameras do. So as far as specifications and everything, they're pretty similar. The big difference is that full frame sensor versus the APS-C sensor. So first, let's look at the camera bodies themselves. Again, these are mirrorless cameras, and mirrorless cameras are always significantly lighter than their full frame mirrored comparable models. Now, I have a cheat sheet here for myself, so pardon me while I look down and check out a lot of these statistics, but the A7 III comes in at $1,998 and 1.43 pounds. The X-H1 comes in at $1,899 and it is 1.48 pounds. So very comparable there. Even down to price, there's going to be an argument that you need the grip to get everything that you get in the Sony. That's true. I regret the whole grip thing when it comes to Fuji. But for the sake of argument, let's say these cameras are comparable and they're within $100 of each other, so even in price they're very comparable. Even if we add the grip to the other one, it makes the X-H1 a little bit more expensive, but in the end they're still comparable. So, and again, what we're looking at today is that whole argument of moving to, do I have to move to APS-C to get a lighter kit? So let's look at the FujiFilm first, and I am only going to be looking at pretty much the two zooms that most people get. I originally wanted to look at the 3 zooms, the super wide, the normal, and the tele, but my problem is that the FujiFilm only has an F4 super wide zoom, so it's hard to compare when the other ones have f2.8 equivalents. So so we're just going to look at that normal and then the tele zooms. And again, if we were looking at primes, we might be looking at a different comparison. And I will encourage everyone to do your own comparison because in the end, only you can decide what's best for you. So, okay, the Fujifilm, the 16 to 55 2.8 is 1.44 pounds, and the 50 to 140 2.8 is 2.19 pounds. To those full frame people, those are roughly equivalent to a 2470 and a 70 to 200. So let's go to Sony, and Sony, the 24 to 70 2.8 is 1.95 pounds, and the 70 to 200 is f2.8 is 3.26 pounds. So that gives us a total on the Fuji of 3.63 and on the Sony 5.21. So we can see we get a pretty decent weight savings by going with a Fuji on f2.8 lenses. Well, let's take this a step further. When we choose to go to APS-C and save weight, we also have to accept that we take about a one-stop hit in what we get out of our lenses. So essentially, an f2.8 lens on an APS-C is kind of the equivalent of an f4 lens on a full frame, because that full frame sensor kind of gives us a stop more light handling, and the effects of depth of field bokeh in particular are more similar on the APS-C with a 2.8 as you would get on an f4 lens on the full frame. And so essentially you got to accept that basic notion that we give up a stop by going to APS-C. And again, from everything I've seen, that runs to be very true with the A7 III versus the X-H1. It's about a stop, penalty, low light performance, and bokeh, which is just pretty much a given. So if we consider that, what if we were willing to take that same performance hit, so to speak, with our full frame camera, and we would do that by actually choosing to go with f4 lenses versus the f2.8 lenses? So essentially IQ, low light, bokeh, and everything would kind of be the same as our APS-C that we're comparing with 2.8 lenses to our full frame, but now we're going to be using those f4 lenses. So let's look at those numbers. If we go to the Sony system, the 24-70 f4 is 0.94 pounds. The 70-200 f4 is 1.85 pounds. Don't have my glasses here. Hopefully I read that right. That gives us a total of 2.79 pounds. Guess what? Putting f4 lenses on our full frame Sony, we just saved weight. So that kind of really affects that whole philosophy of I'm going to APS-C to save weight, when really all you have to do is, in the mirrorless world, is just choose to go with f4 if weight is important. Now, there's a lot of argument, or potential argument, that the f2.8 lenses might be of better quality than the f4. But for the most part, I find a lot of the f4 lenses are pretty good, especially on the Canon side. Now, I can't personally say much about the Sony. I've never owned a Sony. I own a Fuji, a lowly Fuji X-T20, as a matter of fact, not even one of their top-of-the-line cameras, which I'm very happy with, which is what we are filming with today. But I'm, thinking the Sony A7 III was kind of interesting, so I started thinking about it, and that's where I sat there and said, well, if I'm just willing to go to f4 lenses, that full frame system isn't going to be, or I should say full frame Sony A7 III system is not going to be heavier. And again, there's, a lot of people who like Fuji like their lenses. So there's a lot of personal determination there, but let's just say that if we're willing to give up those f2.8s with that full frame system, we can save just as much as going to the APS-C and using f2.8 lenses. So, but let's take it a step further. Let's not give up on the Fuji and sit there and say, oh, well, that settles it. I'm just going to buy some f4 lenses and get that Sony. Looking at the same thing, if we have an f4 lens, but we can use a focal reducer, which it just so happens that recently there's some focal reducers coming out for the Fuji, and if they do not too negatively impact the autofocus so that they become a very viable alternative, now we can buy Canon F4 lenses, and I can say from experience there that some of the Canon F4 lenses are excellent and really nothing to worry about as far as your IQ. So if we look at those, the 24-70 f4 Canon is 1.32 pounds, and the 70-200 f4, which I know without a doubt is an excellent lens from Canon, is 1.55 pounds, and that comes out to 7 pounds, of which we would actually have to add the focal reducer, but that's about 6 ounces. So that actually makes it very comparable to the using the Sony F4 lenses. So there you go. That would be another potential option, and one of the benefits is if you take the focal reducer off on the tele end, you're getting a little more reach, although now you'll be dealing with a f4 on the long end. So hopefully that kind of puts that to rest. Now if we look at one of the other things, let's go ahead and look at those 2 Fuji lenses we talked about. We're talking about 2,498, and that's like current dollars, and that's like selling price, not retail or anything. If we go to the Sony and we look at 2.8 lenses, we're talking $4,796 was the current selling price at a major retailer. It's quite an investment. Whereas the Sony F4 lenses come in at $2,296. So that's actually a little bit cheaper than buying the f2.8s from Fuji. So that's a plus. And even more shocking, if you go to Canon and F4 lenses, we're looking at a $1,498. So even by having to spend another $400 or $500 on a focal reducer, it would still be the cheapest option. So I'm going to be keeping my eye on those focal reducers. But essentially, hopefully, what I covered here is that if your big determination is that you're just trying to save weight so that you're not carrying around this huge monstrous load, APS-C isn't the only way to accomplish that. You can just buy f4 lenses, and in fact many people buy f4 lenses for their full frame systems because they can't afford, or they just can't see spending that kind of money, especially if you're an amateur and you don't have a fortune. And it's not that you're compromising quality that much. I remember when I had my Canon system, I had the 16-35 2.8, but somewhere along the line I sold that off and I got the 17-40 f4, I believe it was, and that was one of my favorite lenses. I remember I did a big job and I shot it all with that 17 to 40, and one of the pictures actually got blown up to 8 foot by 10 foot, and it looked fantastic. So, you know, creating a big argument that, you know, you're not going to get quality lenses at f4s is simply not true. So there you have it. You know, decide what kind of system is best for you. If there's other things about the Fuji that's really doing it for you, you know, buy the Fuji. But if you were sitting there going, oh, I think I want the Sony, but I don't want to buy those big heavy lenses, don't buy all the G Master stuff. And of course, you can always have a mix. You can always buy you know, some f4 lenses, and then maybe for your main lens, whatever that lens is that you personally use the most, you can go ahead and invest in the f2.8 but keep the weight down with all the others, and essentially you're not losing anything. And I think we get kind of a one-way kind of thinking, so people don't think of this as the potential option. So hope this was interesting to you. Hope it was beneficial. If you can, give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe, and I'll see you next time and see what other insights I might be able to bring to you. Bye.